Let's watch some more clips of Brian Tyler Cohen on Piers Morgan, as he always handles himself pretty well and has the ability to get right to the point and explain it in pretty simple words. And he's up against Kari Lake here, of whom just lost her election again, as the misinformation playbook that Trump runs doesn't seem to work as well for her. But let's line up these clips and see what we can discuss from them.
Piers, do you not see any irony in, after years and years and years of conservatives and right-wingers and you coming forward and saying that cancel culture is bad, we hate cancel culture, this is the reason that the left is losing, and now you're calling for the view to be canceled?
I'm ahead of you. My final line says, given the enthusiasm with which the View hosts, all of them, tried so hard to cancel Donald Trump, they should maybe take their own lesson and be cancelled, because it's what they would want. Because they're now the ones, they said Trump was out of step with the American people. They said he was just a little representative of a small number of MAGA people. No, actually, that's not the case. He's had a thumping win across the board. Therefore, the View hosts are out of step with the American people. Therefore, they should be cancelled.
So that's great questioning from Brian, because Piers and the right calling for things on the left to be canceled after years of saying how cancel culture is like wrong and evil. And it just shows how they don't actually hold any of these moral standards they pretend to. They just posture however they need to play the victim, where they can then turn around and justify doing it to the left when they're in power because, you know, left bad and we're good, so anything that happens to us is wrong. And the other part of this that is funny is it just shows how there's a standard the left is held to that is just unfair, and the right will never be held to that. And there's also annoying tone that the right takes anytime that they do win, where since 2016, the right has been wrong about 2018, where they predicted to keep control and lost it, 2020, where they predicted to win the presidency and got blown out, and 2022, where they predicted a red wave and Democrats ended up overperforming. And it's just like, oh, we still have to take these people serious after all of these things that they got wrong, and then the lies that they openly just spew as well. But the left loses once in a close election, and they're like, they need canceled now. We can't take them serious anymore. Like, this margin of victory is smaller than the margin of victory in 2020 for Democrats. But look how Piers and the right framed this election versus the 2021.
Trump won his election by a 1.5% popular vote margin in the country. Joe Biden won that by 3 times that much in 2020. The notion that this is some massive repudiation of the Democratic Party and that we have to burn the whole thing down and
Brian,
up from the ashes rise some physics is a joke.
Brian. Look, to make your day even worse, by the way, I know you do a bit of work for MSNBC.
Let me finish talking.
Elon Musk is about to buy you.
I'm not in denial about the fact that Democrats have lost, and in fact, I, more than anybody online, I'm sure on the left, has been open to this idea of introspection. What Democrats can do moving forward. But the notion that all of a sudden the Democratic Party is irrelevant when a couple million more people for the second time in this century voted for Republicans in the popular vote over the Democrats.
Come on, Brian. If I say
he is right here, but there is one part I slightly do disagree with him on. I mean, he kind of goes into it, but I guess he just didn't say it as strong as I would like. I think Democrats do need to change. I think they need to start leaning more into the Bernie-esque left-wing populism rather than the center-left candidates like Biden and Kamala. I think we would have been better off if Kamala ran on like a 2019 platform, like how she ran then, rather than how they had her run now, because it causes to lose in some key demographics, in my opinion. But this election was about prices. It was about shock from the pandemic, the right-wing misinformation circling all of that had to come from that, right? Like he said, the idea that the Democratic agenda is being rejected when just for the second time this century, Republicans have won the popular vote is insane. It's just this corny behavior, like this thing the right does, where they try to minimize anything the left does, and then anything they win or do is the greatest of all time. We won by a landslide in 2020. We cleaned up in the House and Senate as well by a wider margin than Trump just won by, with more votes as well. That's if we're talking electorally or the popular vote. And Trump won again 4 years later, running on practically the same platform. That alone shows that if an actual blowout like 2020 wasn't a rejection of a party's agenda in so much that they can win another election one cycle later, then a relatively close election definitely isn't.
Piers, in 2020, would you have said the same thing about the Republican Party that lost by a 4.5% margin nationally?
No.
Well, there you go. That's your
No,
cognitive
because I
dissonance
felt the
on full
2020.
display.
No, I'll tell you why, since you've asked. Because I felt the 2020 election was effectively a referendum on a once in a lifetime pandemic, which affected absolutely everything. If that election had taken place before the pandemic in 2020, say in February, Trump would have won, I think, by a landslide. So I think that's why I say they're different circumstances.
This part is insane because he's honestly so close to getting it, but his inherent bias is only allowing him to see it for one side, because the 2020 election was largely a referendum on the pandemic and the effects it caused. But guess what? The 2024 election was also largely a referendum on the pandemic and the effects it caused. The inflation that we felt after 2020 from Biden's whole term was because of the supply chain shock that the pandemic created, because of money that had to be spent trying to remedy that. Still, that Biden had to spend on COVID relief, and it began growing under Trump anyway. This largest single year increase since the greatest recession in CPI was in 2020. Shutting down our economy led to GDP and wage loss. That happened under Trump. We know with Trump withholding and even outbidding states for needed equipment like safety equipment, protective equipment, led to them having to stay closed longer than they needed to as well, which exacerbated the issue further. Trump also slashed OPEC, which is something that nobody ever talks about for some reason. I don't really understand that. And these are things that directly led to higher grocery prices, gas prices, housing prices, the economic feel on a micro level of people feeling like it's negative, despite on the macro level, all statistics being strong during Biden's presidency, where again, I think more likely than not, probably any incumbent president would have lost, just like in 2020, any incumbent party most likely would have lost that election, because it comes down to the fact that most people still unfortunately vote on vibes. And I mean, that's what happened again this year.